Hi, my name is Kyla, also known as Kai the Lightworker. I am a spiritual teacher and coach. And if after watching this video you still feel like you need guidance, I would love to work with you. My website will be in the description box. And before I start this video, I just want to make it clear I am not against therapy. What I am against is people paying thousands of dollars and going to somebody for years that's just helping them to cope, but not helping them to thrive. I know so many people that have went to therapy for years, and respectfully, you can't tell. It's like they just use their therapist as a crutch. They're so dependent on their therapist for their well being when they really need to be dependent on God. Because a therapist ain't going to be with you 24/7, but God is. And if you don't believe in God, you might want to go ahead and turn this off. Because I'm going to be talking about God a lot because God was heavily involved in my healing process. The most important piece that's missing from traditional therapy is spirituality. There's a spiritual component to almost every mental issue because most mental issues stem from unresolved trauma, spiritual warfare. And that's a big part of the reason why I do the work that I do. And I'm pretty sure that's why I went through all the things that I went through so that I can do this work. And I would be doing a disservice if I just told you guys how I healed, but I didn't tell you what exactly I healed from. Ever since I was little, I had really bad anxiety, so my voice would constantly shake and crack, and sometimes it still does. But now I love myself, so I don't really take it that seriously. But back then, I used to hate myself, and people constantly used to make fun of me. That's why I would be terrified for the teacher to call on me because I'm like, oh no, it's going to happen. Everybody's going to know my secret about my voice. And I didn't know anything about anxiety, so I didn't understand why that would happen. So I would be so embarrassed. I was very suicidal, not just because of my voice, but because of the fact that I had anxiety. But back then, I didn't know what anxiety was, so I just thought I was crazy. I knew it was something wrong with me, but I didn't know what. I was constantly cutting myself, constantly having panic attacks, and I would have these episodes where I would just go into this catastrophic thinking of the worst case scenarios. And like I said, I didn't know what was wrong with me, but I knew it wasn't normal. Parents had me when they were 15. Then they broke up a couple years later, and my mom ended up having two more kids. One when she was 20, the other when she was 25. So by the age of 25, she had three kids, and she was a single mother. And because I was the oldest, I had to take on the responsibilities, more responsibilities than a child should have. I was pretty much the substitute mom. And I had a lot of resentment towards my mom because of that, because I'm like, I didn't lay down and have these kids. Why do I have to be responsible for them? I was also very intimidated by my mom because she always seemed mad, like she didn't want us around. Later on in life, I realized it's just because she was stressed. She was living in survival. On top of that, she had a bunch of trauma that she wasn't even aware of. I didn't feel seen. I didn't feel heard. My feelings were constantly invalidated. I felt like my voice didn't matter. And that probably played a role in the fact that I had a shaky voice. That's why I say everything is spiritual. On top of that, my mom was so hard on me. That caused me to be a perfectionist. I was always seeking her approval. I never felt good enough. But my Nana, that was my safe place. She was my bodyguard. Anytime my mom did something wrong, she would check her. So when she died when I was 8, that was devastating. And I felt so alone because I looked at her like a mother figure. My father, he was in and out of my life. On top of that, he actually molested me when I was 3. And me and my mom didn't realize it was him until I got older. It's a really long story, but long story short, I lived with him my senior year of high school, and he was doing a lot of perverted things. I won't get into all the things that he did, but one of the things that he did, he came home drunk, and I was asleep on the couch. He pulls me off the couch and I wake up. I'm like, what are you doing? What do you want? And he was like, just give me a kiss. And he grabs my face and he wanted me to kiss him on the lips. And I was like, no, are you crazy? And he was like, come on, just lay down with me. He wanted me to lay down with him on the other couch. Obviously, a couch is only so wide. If you laying down on a couch with somebody, y'all gonna be touching. That was one of many perverted things he did while I was living with him and his girlfriend. And the only reason I was living with him was because my mom moved to Florida. And she was like, the only way you can stay here, the only way you won't have to move is if you find somebody to stay with. And it was my senior year of high school. So I didn't want to move. And me and my dad reconnected. And I'm like, oh, okay, I could just live with my dad. No, that was not a good idea, but it actually was because that's what confirmed what I had secretly been feeling all along, all throughout my childhood. I constantly would ask myself, Kyla, is your dad the one who molested you? What if your dad was the one who molested you? I always questioned that to myself. I just never spoke to anybody about it, but I always had this feeling. I always had this weird feeling around him, like I always felt uncomfortable, but I didn't know why. Eventually, I told my mom everything that had been going on. And she asked me a question that I always ask myself, Kyla, are you sure your dad wasn't the one who molested you? And she was telling me certain things that happened around the molestation that were very suspicious. And she told me something that I didn't even remember. She told me that after I was molested, she actually kept him away for a few years because she suspected that it was him, but she didn't have proof. And I never came out and told her that it was him. But obviously, I was 3. He probably manipulated me and told me not to tell. Like, it's so easy to manipulate a child, and a child doesn't know what it means to be molested. So, yeah, I never told her I was molested. So, she couldn't prove that he did it, but she always had a suspicion. So, yeah, long story short, I ended up packing all my things and moving out while him and his girlfriend was at work, and I never looked back. So, because of all these things I went through, I have very low self esteem. So, I was always looking for my worth in boys. I was boy crazy. I lost my virginity when I was 14. All throughout my teenage years to my early 20s, I was always attached to somebody's son. So, when I turned 18, me and my friend got our own little apartment and I started wilding out. I was being very promiscuous. I was drinking a lot. I was watching a lot of porn. I ended up getting an STD. Thankfully, it was curable. But I ended up getting an STD. Then, shortly after, I ended up pregnant and I ended up getting an abortion. So, around the age of 23, that's when I calmed down in some ways, but I still wasn't healed. I was still drinking a lot. And then I started smoking a lot. So I was high all day, every day. So I was still lost in the sauce. And then at the age of 25, I got into a relationship with a narcissist. That's what finally woke me up. But before I woke up, I let this man take me on a hellish roller coaster for almost 4 years. And I won't even get into everything that happened because then this video would be like 3 or 4 hours long. Let's just say it was a hell of a ride. And he even told me in the beginning, I'm going to take you on a hell of a ride. I'm going to take you on a roller coaster. And I just thought it was cute. I'm like, ooh, I'm excited. Okay. No, I shouldn't have been excited. I should have been scared for my life. Literally. Because that's what finally made me walk away was I realized my life was in jeopardy being with this man. Once he shook me and choked me, that's what made me realize, Kyla, if you don't leave this man, it's only a matter of time before he kills you. But a year and a half before we broke up, one of my brothers committed suicide. And that brought a lot of things to the surface that I had been suppressing for years, things that I completely forgot about. And his suicide helped me to forgive my parents, even my dad. Not only do I forgive him, but I have empathy for him because I know that he's just sick. He has certain things happen to him as a child, and that's part of the reason why he did what he did. I'm not excusing it, but I just understand generational curses and generational trauma. Even though I don't speak to him and I don't want nothing to do with him, I genuinely do forgive him and I pray that he heals. So once I finally left that crazy man, I completely surrendered to God. And I realized it wasn't just him I needed to heal from, it was everything that led me to be with him in the first place. Everything leading up to that relationship was what I needed to heal from. Yeah, I needed to heal from everything he did, but it really wasn't about him. He was the catalyst. So every single day, I would seek God. Every single morning, I would have heart to heart conversations with God, asking him to heal me, asking him to show me the way. And then I would meditate. And through these meditations, he will reveal things to me about myself. And I was able to connect the dots. I was starting to see, oh, the reason I get triggered by this is because of this that happened to me when I was a child. Oh, the reason why I think like this about myself is because of this that happened to me when I was a child. I was able to connect the dots, and me connecting the dots allowed me to start to see myself for who I really was. Not the little girl who was wounded and had all this trauma and self esteem issues, but I started to slowly see myself the way God sees me: worthy, loved, appreciated, good enough, more than enough. When I would do these meditations, I would visualize myself hugging the little girl I used to be and telling her all the things she needed to hear. When I would have these meditations, I would put myself in the shoes of every single person that's hurt me. And instead of feeling like a victim and instead of being resentful, I would have empathy for them because I understood on a higher level that the things they did to me had nothing to do with me. It had everything to do with them and their trauma. So I didn't take it personal anymore. When I would have these meditations, I would forgive myself. I would give myself grace for all the mistakes I made, all the times I degraded and devalued myself. I gave myself grace because I just didn't know who I was. I didn't know my worth. I would visualize myself having empathy for myself because I didn't know any better. But now that I know better, I'm going to do better. Now that I know my worth, I'm going to live up to it. I started journaling. These were my letters to God. And I made sure I dated them so I could go back and track my progress and see how far I've come and see how much I've transformed. I started talking to myself in the mirror and speaking life into myself. And I did this to get rid of those self defeating beliefs and form new empowering ones. I even made a list of affirmations that I would say every single day, and I still say them to this day. Another thing that was a huge part of my healing process was psychedelics. And I'm not gonna lie, I was hesitant to even mention that because I don't want people to think I'm encouraging them to do psychedelics. In fact, I don't think you should do psychedelics unless you feel called to and you've done a lot of research. But I have to be honest about my healing process and about my journey. And I'm gonna be real, psychedelics played a really big role in me healing as well. I had so many epiphanies on psychedelics. I realized so many things about myself. I uncovered so many hidden traumas that I had and triggers that I had. And that's why when people demonize psychedelics and say, oh, it's the devil, blah, 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 it's only the devil depending on the person that's using them. My intentions for doing psychedelics wasn't to party or do nothing crazy. My intentions were strictly spiritual. And by the way, I actually did go to therapy at the beginning of my healing journey. And I know you're probably like, what? This whole video was about how you heal without therapy. I did, but I did a few sessions just to try it out. Also, because I'm not gonna lie, I would constantly hear people say, like, oh, you should go to therapy, you should go to therapy. Like, people make it seem like that's what you have to do in order to heal. But I quickly realized I actually didn't need it. All I needed was me and God. There was one thing the therapist said that made those 3 or 4 sessions worth it. I was telling him about how I used to place my ex on such a high pedestal. And I used to feel so special because he chose me out of all the other girls he could have because he was so fine and talented and blah, blah, blah. And he was like, well, do you feel that way now? And I'm like, absolutely not. I do not look at him like that anymore. And he was like, good. Well, I want to tell you something that I want you to keep in mind moving forward. You're not special because he chose you. He chose you because you're special. And he wasn't specifically talking about him. He was telling me that to keep in mind moving forward. Don't ever feel like, oh, I'm so special because this man chose me. No, you're already special, and that's why he chose you. I love you guys. I pray this message was helpful. One of the longest videos I've ever recorded. As you can see, because it's dark outside now. But yeah, I pray this message helped you. If it did, please make sure you like it. Please make sure you subscribe. If it spoke to you, leave me a comment. Tell me what spoke to you the most. And like I said, if you still feel like you need guidance, I would love to help you. My website is in the description box below. I've been talking for so long, but I knew I had to get this message out. But yeah, I'll see you guys soon. Love you guys. Bye.